Why is Bitcoin critical to the prosperity of the United States in the 21st century? That is the question we all should be asking. There are many metaphors for thinking about a strategic reserve of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is digital capital. If we thought of it as Bitcoin as digital capital, is this a stockpile of cheese? Is this a stockpile of oil, natural gas, or even uranium, all of which would be interesting? Well, at its worst case, in its narrowest form, you could think about the strategic Bitcoin reserve as a stockpile of the apex asset of the human race. And so what's it worth? Well, over the next 20 years, I think it's worth anywhere from $3 trillion to $106 trillion to the United States.
20년에 걸쳐 106조 달러라면 2045년까지 하나로 대략 15경 5,427조에 달하는 시가총액입니다. 현재 영상을 찍는 날짜인 2025년 4월 2일 기준으로 비트코인의 시가총액은 2,480조에 달하는데요. 마이클 세일러가 언급한 15경에 도달하려면 약 60배를 올라야 하는데 비트코인이 정말 그렇게 오를 수 있을까요? 지금부터 마이클 세일러가 하는 이야기를 잘 들어보시죠.
US corporations like my corporation are actually recapitalizing on Bitcoin. We've gone from having $250 million of assets 48 months ago to having nearly $45 billion of assets in 48 months. If you look out over the next 20 years, corporations that are accumulating Bitcoin on their reserve, like MSTR, like Mara, like Riot, they're going to have 20 to 40 trillion dollars. So this is a small metaphor, but it's a powerful metaphor. But, you know, it's hard to rent out or finance or develop your cheese or your gold or your natural gas buried in a vault. So a more powerful metaphor is Bitcoin is digital property. If you own 5% of Manhattan and your family had owned it for 100 years and someone said, how are you going to pay your bills? You wouldn't say, we're just going to sell it. You would say, we're going to rent it. We're going to develop it. We're going to put a building on top of it, a business on top of it, or we're going to finance it. We're going to borrow against it. The same is true with Bitcoin. In 20 years, the United States could be generating $10 trillion per year by renting, developing, or financing the assets in that strategic Bitcoin reserve. The AIs are coming. The AIs don't get bank accounts. They don't get credit cards. The AIs, the artificial intelligence economy, will be built on digital capital, digital property. It'll be a $100 trillion economy. It'll be built on Bitcoin. Well, a lot of people, they think of it as an asset. You think of it as a property, but what we know to be true is that Bitcoin is actually a network, and it's not just any network. It's not an information network. It's an energy network. It's a conservative network. I can send $1 billion from me to you. I lose it. You have it. That is the conservation of energy in cyberspace. What's driving the growth of Bitcoin? It is the most powerful force in the world right now. It's growing nearly 60%. It's become the eighth largest asset in the world. It's about to become the largest asset in the world in the next 48 months. This is a map of the wealth distribution in the world, about $900 trillion. If you break it into uses, half of it is just a store of value. We're long-term, we're preserving our capital for the long term. We just want to keep our money. The other half are assets held for utility. I want to do something with the asset. If you drill into the 450 trillion, you realize the problem is that long-term capital is being dissipated and decimated by fires, by floods, by famines, by tariffs, by wars, by competition, by rust, by obsolescence, by torts, by traffic, you name it, right? What's that cost? That costs 10 trillion a year. There's people go, well, what is Bitcoin's use case? The use case is to not suffer $10 trillion a year of damage from entropy, from inflation, from chaos, from the future. Bitcoin's an asset without the financial risk of a currency, a bond, a stock, and we're stripping away the counterparty risk to everything. And so we're moving away from risk, and what that means is that as the word spreads that there's an opportunity to keep your money without taking risk, long-term capital is being merged into the Bitcoin network.
세계적인 부자 워렌버핏 찰리 먼거는 말합니다. 비트코인은 가치를 창출하지 않기 때문에 아무런 쓸모가 없는 허상일 뿐이다. 하지만 오늘 마이클 세일러가 이야기하는 비트코인의 역할의 핵심은 아이러니하게도 비트코인은 매년 10조 달러씩 가치를 창출한다고 합니다. 화재, 홍수, 기근, 관세, 전쟁, 경쟁 등 인간 세상의 불가피한 리스크 때문에 사라지는 경제적 가치는 실제로 있고 비트코인은 그런 리스크에서 완전히 해방될 수 있는 유일한 자산이라는 거죠. 과연 그럴까요? 영상 이어서 보겠습니다.
The greatest digital transformation of the 21st century, it isn't the transformation of music, it isn't the transformation of your photos, your communications, your Facebook friends, or educational videos, although each of those things made a $1 trillion company. The greatest digital transformation is the transformation of capital. So it's the transformation of 450 trillion. What's it worth? It's worth half of everything. It's half of everything. That's the transformation. Digital capital is stronger, faster, and smarter capital. It's everything you don't like about the building stripped away, and you've got an invisible, indestructible, immortal, teleportable building. It's a better building. It's global capital. It's everybody that's living in Asia and Africa and South America would move to the U.S. if they could. They'd move their money to the U.S. if they could. They want the currency of the U.S. They want the property of the U.S. They want the security of the U.S. They want the values of the U.S. But they can't have it. So the second best thing they can have is move their money into the Bitcoin network, which has all of the values, protections, and securities of the U.S. Bitcoin is immortal capital. Right? You can keep your money for 1,000 years. A 10 basis point fee works out to a useful lifetime of 1,000 years. All the other long-term capital assets have a life of 10 to 100 years. Find a business you want to invest in that'll be around for 500 years. Find a bond that will pay off in 500 years. Find a piece of art that'll still be legible in 500 years.
비트코인 원본의 가치는 영원하다. 오늘 마이클 세일러의 연설을 들어보니 기술적으로나 역사적으로나 일리가 있는 말들이 많이 있는 것 같습니다. 오늘도 시청해주셔서 감사합니다.